Eddie, well, this is our first Matchroom interview of the year. I think it's only right we start off by paying respects to Sina and Latz, obviously two integral members of AJ's team who unfortunately passed away in Nigeria at the back end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, just the saddest of days, the saddest of weeks, and moments and time since then. Two guys that were a massive part of Anthony's life, a massive part of the team. One and both of them who we have been around for really over a decade in working with Anthony, and two great guys. Two guys that were completely full of life and energy. Sina would walk into a room and just light it up. Come on, like he was just like the absolute energy lifter. And Latz the same. A really deep individual, a man of extreme faith and positivity. And we'll miss them dearly. Like I said, these are people who had incredible families and big groups and networks of friends. And I know people talk about members of AJ's team, but they were much more than that. Obviously, they were some of his best mates and guys that he trusted implicitly, guys that were there for him at all moments. Particularly in the last camp, Sina was really, the camp leader. I remember, that fight in Miami. Sina was so protective over AJ. He cared so much about the camp and the team and him. I remember coming in and Tammy, the lady, told us we got, I think, 6 or 7 minutes, and Anthony was just kind of like, in concentration and meditation. I went over to AJ, I said, AJ, just to let you know, just give him the time. And Sina said, Eddie, let him focus. And that's how much he cared. He just had his back at all times. And Latz as well. I stayed with those guys in Dubai a couple of months ago, and had the pleasure of spending some time with Latz and training with him. Just a great, positive individual. Someone that really lived life. And we, the team at Matchroom, everybody just send our prayers to their families and everybody close to them. For Anthony, since the incident, the accident, I've had people phone, what's the update? The reality is, this is not a time for updates. This is not a time for careers. This is a time for faith and prayer and healing for Anthony. Physically, spiritually, emotionally, you've got to give him time. And we're not interested in the future right now. We're interested in, as I said, Anthony and his well-being, and obviously the well-being as much as possible as the friends and family that are affected by this tragic incident. So right now, I know we've got an event this week and media. There's no comment from us on anything regarding Anthony. Give him his time to heal, and as I said, just absolute prayers with Sina and Latz's friends and family on the tragic loss of two brilliant men.
It was said, Ed. And I think obviously now we are here in New York. Behind you, you've got the Brooklyn Nets. Just behind you, we're in the Barclays Centre for this week. We are going to transition now into why we're here. Subriel Matias and Dalton Smith. I guess another fighter who you took from Team GB all the way to that world title shot. Just how ready is Dalton Smith ready for
this? Is it for Dalton. This is, you get the apprenticeship, as people say. You go through school, you go through college, you go through university, and now you're ready for the big real world. And that's where Dalton Smith is at. He's done everything perfectly. He's won all those domestic and European titles. His apprenticeship, his education has been perfect. He's been at the top school. He went to Harvard, quite literally. And now you go out there and you do what you're supposed to do, which is to become world champion. We've had this young man since he made his professional debut, been faultless, elite fighter, but this is where you find out. And you come over to America, to Brooklyn, to New York, to win a world title on away soil. These are the kind of nights that make you a superstar. And we believe he's going to do it in style against a very dangerous Subriel Matias. You've seen this guy, I think all of his victories is bar one from knockout. But you saw what Liam Paro did to him, when you have the ability to use your footwork, to use your IQ, but it's a hard night's work, a hard night's work. But we fully expect and believe Dalton Smith will become world champion on Saturday.
Dalton is Sheffield's most successful amateur fighter. Did you always know that he had the pedigree to go and do this?
Yeah, Dalton was so highly rated as an amateur, but you can be highly rated as an amateur. The proof is in the pudding as you go through the gears and the levels. But he's gone through those gears and levels so well. So that gives us the confidence to believe that he's ready for this level. This is a jump from anywhere that he's boxed before. But that's how it's supposed to be. This is where you really find out what you've got. And if Dalton is that elite fighter that we believe he is, he'll win. And he'll win in style on Saturday. It won't be easy. And it shouldn't be easy. But, you know, this is where we expected him to be. We expected him at some point to challenge for the world title, and he does it on Saturday night.
This fight hasn't gone without controversy, and obviously Subriel Matias returned a positive test for Osterine back in November, I believe. How does that sit with you and the team, knowing that that's on record?
I mean, I think, you know, we've been through this so many times on both sides, with fighters that we've represented, with fighters that we haven't represented. I'm a real believer in allowing it to give the fighter an opportunity to explain themselves, to go through due process. But this wasn't decided that way. This was decided in quite a unique way, where the New York State Athletic Commission, who are an outstanding commission and one of the most strictest, have a rule where you are allowed a certain amount of Osterine in your body. I'm not a scientist. I don't know why that level is allowed for a substance like that, but it's the rule. And we can scream about it, we can shout about it, but ultimately, if we pull out of the fight, we're in breach of our contract, and more importantly, we lose the opportunity to fight for the WBC world title. So all the time in these situations, the commission is given the decision to make. And what they did, the commission, was follow their rules. Do I think their rules are right? No, I don't, if I'm honest. But that's their rules, and there's nothing we can do about it. So the testing from that moment has been even more extensive than it was before. They've done everything they can to you know, give them peace of mind. We're happy because we have to be happy. We don't want to go into this fight sulking. We don't want to go into this fight feeling we're hard done by. It is what it is. And we know what we're up against, and we win on Saturday night. That's what we do. He needs to answer to his actions, in my opinion. Because what we can't just say, in my opinion also, is, oh, it's okay, he had a bit of Osterine in him, so that's fine, we just carry on. That's ridiculous. We need to go through a process of why. This fight, you know, for a lot of incidents that have happened in the past, those fights haven't taken place. In this instance, nearly 99 times out of 100, the fight would be off, because the commission would say absolutely not. But because of New York State Athletic Commission's rules, which go against the rules of WADA, which is very unique again, we are where we are, and it's on.
In terms of Dalton's performance, I think you touched on where Paro had success against Matias, but do you think he can land that thunderous punch to get the knockout against him? You
know, I think that Dalton hits harder than Liam Paro. Liam Paro is a brilliant fighter, and technically he got it right that night. I don't think Subriel was at his best, and I don't know if it's the pressure of fighting at home or what it was, but Dalton is sharper than Liam Paro. Dalton hits harder than Liam Paro. But again, it's all about the moment. As always, the high-level sport is about the moment. You can have the best education, you can have the best preparation, but on the night, under the bright lights, if you don't get it right, you don't win. But the real ones, they get it right on the night, and Dalton's a real one.
And should he get it right on the night, I think he'll be keeping tabs on a monster fight that's happening again here in New York on January 31st. That's going to be one of the fights of the year, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's part of the carrot of this victory on Saturday. You become WBC world champion in a division that is full of great fighters. Richardson, Hitchens, of course Shakur against Teofimo coming up, Gary Russell Jr. This changes everything for Dalton Smith. This puts his name up in lights and puts him in the frame for all the massive fights, hopefully back at Hillsborough particularly. But this makes him, a real true British and global star with victory on Saturday.
Just talking about the fight on January 31st, stylistically, how do you see it shaping up with Shakur and Teo?
I think it's a fight that could be a little bit of a chess match early on. You've got two guys that are very reactive, two guys that are super sharp, two guys that like to feint and set traps, and two guys with tremendous boxing IQ and footwork. So generally that lends itself to a fight that's going to be quite nip and tuck and a little bit of a chess match early on. I think the fight could be won maybe by the person that takes the fight by the scruff of the neck. You know, sometimes in those kind of fights it can be a very close fight with very close rounds. Neither fighter will want to be reckless, neither fighter will want to make mistakes because they know they'll get punished. But sometimes you have to take the fight by the scruff of the neck in a fight like that. And perhaps the one that does it could edge out those close rounds.
Who has more to lose in that fight, do you think?
Good question. Look, for Shakur, I think Shakur is massively underrated in terms of his achievements and his ability. Everyone in boxing knows how good Shakur is. He is pound for pound, top 5 in terms of quality. But look at the achievements of the young man. At 28 years of age, he's already a 3-division world champion. This is to become a 4-division world champion. Quite remarkable. And Teofimo always rises to the occasion. Sometimes you see a little bit of a lackluster performance when he's not motivated, when there isn't kind of any legacy on the line. This is different. This is a sold-out Madison Square Garden between two of the elite fighters of our generation. And the best thing about this fight is we're seeing them in their prime. And that's what we need to make great fights. As I said, sold out Madison Square Garden, live on the zone, ring 6. It's a massive night of boxing.
And when we think ahead to that night, I mean, you said it's a sold-out event, but we think back to the great nights even we've had at the Garden, let alone the Garden itself has had over history. I think Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, that atmosphere was electric. You think of Ireland and Puerto Rico, but for here, you're going to have Brooklyn, and you're going to have Brooklyn, and you're going to have Newark just across the water. So that's going to be
I mean, you know, again, people like to downplay Shakur's star power and his support. He'll have massive support from Newark that night. Teofimo's from Brooklyn. You know, there's something very special about a Madison Square Garden fight. You always get drama. You know, we saw it with Katie Taylor Serrano a couple of times. Of course, AJ against Ruiz. So many more great nights that we've staged there. Always a brilliant night. And this night, January 31st, is shaping up to be a true classic.
Another belt holder in that division, Richardson Hitchens. I think he's a notable absence from that card, despite all the noise he's making on social media. What can you tell us about his situation right now?
Well, at the moment, you know, we were planning on putting him on that card. The ring decided to put Keyshawn on that card and the zone, and now there's a February 21st card that's coming up that looks like Richardson could feature on. So look, he's a world champion in the division. He's a tough guy to beat, and sometimes when you're that good, it's quite difficult to get the fights that you want. So he's ready. He wants the big fights, but we'll see if he lands on Feb 21st.
And we're just talking about fighters that go from pro debut to that world title shot, Dalton and AJ. I think that's kind of what's on offer, isn't it, for Ammo Williams on that show as well. And he gets his shot at the WBC World Middleweight title. What a moment for him. So
proud of Ammo, and, you know, he's never lost faith. You talk about, you know, Ammo went through a phase in his life that would have finished most people's career, right? Mentally, he was down and out, done. He lost his way and he found a way back, right? And he did it with a lot of people's help, you know, with Pete Berg, with Sam Katowski, with me, with Matchroom. But there's only one person that can pull yourself out of that hole, and that's you. And somehow, Ammo found the strength from within to pull himself out of the hole that he was in. And honestly, the fact that he's even fighting and the way that he has come back is so admirable. Like it really is. I know the story's been told a little bit, but it's a story that needs to be told, because if you knew the ins and outs, like, you know, I never thought he'd fight again. And like I said, the way that he's come back, admirable. Of course, the defeat to Shiraz. You know, I'll take nothing away from Hamza Shiraz because he's an amazing fighter, but Ammo trained for 4 weeks for that fight. Again, he was playing with the game at that point. Now he's on it, but he's on it in a really, really tough fight against Adames. But he's on it and in it to fight for the WBC World Title, and he can do it. And he's got heart, and he's got spirit, and he's got ability. And we would be very proud if Ammo Williams could become WBC World Champion at Madison Square Garden. Last time he boxed there, he was sensational. You know, he won a first round knockout against a very good fighter. And, you know, Ammo's a good fighter. And maybe you're getting Adames at a good time.
I think we look at January. January's a pretty busy month for us, isn't it? A great start to the year. I think sandwiched in between this Saturday and January 31st, we've got another world title fight, Andy Cruz, Raymond Muratalla, for the IBF 135-pound title. A huge opportunity for him in just his 7th fight.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at our January, it's quite sensational. Andy Cruz against Muratalla at the Fontainebleau in Las Vegas. You've got Ismail Madrimov back on the card there. What a fight, 175 pound, the grudge match. Philly against New Jersey, Jesse Hart against Khalil Coe. Andy Cruz against Muratalla, phenomenal fight. Muratalla's a very, very good fighter, underrated fighter. Brilliant trainer in Robert Garcia. But Andy's Andy, and Andy's, I nearly swore, but he's fucking good, seriously good. And this is his moment. But he's had a handful of fights. So, you know, him, Bozy, Giron, the Ennises, all the team, we go to Las Vegas with the expectancy that Andy Cruz becomes world lightweight champion. And it is a 50-50 fight, it really is. As is, 1 week later, on the same night, January 31st, what a double header. Josh Kelly against Murtazaliev. I think, again, because Murtazaliev is maybe a little bit unknown to those outside of the boxing world, you need to know this is a serious fight. This is one of the top world championship fights that we've hosted in Britain for many years. But Josh Kelly can win this fight. Murtazaliev just destroyed Tim Tszyu last night. He's been a little bit inactive because no one wants to fight him. But Adam Booth and Josh Kelly stepped up and went, we can beat him. We bring it to the northeast. You know, again, a big card there as well. Josh Padley going for the European title. We've got a big female star is going to be added to that card as well. We'll announce shortly. But that fight, that is a true elite danger man in Murtazaliev coming to fight a Brit for the World Championship. And Josh Kelly can win that fight. And he wins that fight. You know, we already have an agreement in place for him to fight Boots Ennis. The kid's going to make a fortune. And Josh Kelly's really good. Talk about Andy Cruz. Josh Kelly's really good. But he's up against a monster in Murtazaliev. And like I said, our January of Cruz against Muratalla, Kelly against Murtazaliev, and Shakur against Teofimo Lopez, we are coming out firing before we go into a massive February.
So there is so much to talk about on this first interview, I think. Just elsewhere, I guess the welterweight division has some big ramifications for Matchroom on the world stage. Lewis Crocker, we saw a handshake emoji across social media. Is that rematch likely to land for the IBF title?
Yeah, look, I think Conor Walker has done everything that's been asked of him. He took the fight with Pat McCormack that nobody wanted to take. He beat him as the underdog in that fight. You know, he won the British and Commonwealth title. He fought Lewis Crocker in a very close fight in his backyard. And now he may be going to Lewis Crocker's backyard. You know, we're speaking to the IBF about the date and everything. That's one hell of a rematch. You know, Belfast against Wolverhampton. And the first fight was a fight of the year contender. The second fight will be even better. And it will come with the carrot of the World Welterweight Championship. Not done yet, but stand by for an announcement of Lewis Crocker's next fight.
Moving on, Devin Haney's gone public that he has a few options for defence of the WBO title. Jack Catterall sitting pretty at the top. How's that looking?
Yeah, you know, Sam Jones has been doing his usual 10 phone calls a day about Jack Catterall, and Jack, after his performance against Echo Esserman, has earned that right to fight for the world title. He's the #1 challenger for Devin Haney. We're ready for that fight. You know, there's a couple of other names that have been mentioned, but you know, as always, Jack wants to fight for the world title, and if Devin's looking for an opponent, it would be a pleasure to make that fight.
We understand that Mario Barrios will defend his title against Ryan Garcia Feb 21. Is Conor Benn going to hang around for the winner of that fight? Or?
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum for Conor. It's a nice conundrum because he's the mandatory challenger for the winner of that fight. We know as well that, you know, you've got Teo against Shakur. Maybe the winner's trying to step up to welter. Everybody's calling Conor Benn out, but it's just making sure that myself, Conor, Lee, Keith, Tony, the whole team get the strategy right, because we should only wait if we're guaranteed that fight, and we won't know for a while because that fight hasn't even taken place yet if we are guaranteed that fight. So we're doing the work behind the scenes. Ryan Garcia against Conor Benn, arguably the biggest fight in boxing. I mean, we would take 15,000 to Las Vegas for that fight. Conor would sell out a stadium with Ryan. Ryan's a huge name. He's got to beat Barrios first. I believe he will. So that's a monster fight. But we got to worry about Conor Benn and Conor Benn only. And I'm not having him sitting around waiting. You know what he's like. He's back in the gym already. he's looking phenomenal. He's not going to want to wait till July, August to fight. We need to fight May, June at the absolute latest, if we're guaranteed that fight. If not, we'll go earlier. But, you know, we got to focus on his career. He's in a wonderful position, one of the biggest stars in the sport, but he wants that WBC world title, and it's our job to try and deliver it for him.
And whilst we're talking about mandatories, Rolly Romero claims that he's never heard of Shakur Stevenson, but as a mandatory for his title, I guess he's had to fight him surely or vacate.
Well, he's going to have to know about Shakur Stevenson because he's got to fight him. And let me tell you, Rolly Romero, who did brilliantly against Ryan Garcia, is very fortunate to be in the position that he is in terms of the Super Championship. Because if you know the history, Jaron Ennis against Stanionis in a unification was for the Super Championship. The winner of that fight was ordered to fight Shakur Stevenson. Then they made Ryan Garcia against Rolly Romero for the regular title, aka interim title. In the meantime, Boots moves to 154. They elevate the champion, and what's happened to Shakur Stevenson? He has been so hard done by, and I'm glad now the WBA are doing what's right. You know, this young man has been through a hell of a lot. You know, the passing of his daughter, the strength that he's had to come back and take that fight on the undercard there, where, you know, he was just emotionally, he must have been in such a horrific situation. It's time. So I don't care whether you've heard of him or not. He'll beat you. Shakur Stevenson will beat Rolly Romero, and he will become world champion. And he deserves it. He's been waiting. No more rubbish. No more, you know, let's just get the fight made. And we are doing everything we can with Vadim and the team to make sure the WBA stand by their word. I believe they're calling purse bids imminently for that fight. And it will be Rolly Romero against Shakur Stevenson for the World Welterweight title.
We've got a very short amount of time left, Eddie, but we'll just run through these last few. I think, you know, there's things we haven't even touched on. The Matchroom and DAZN schedule for the first quarter is really filling up quite nicely. We haven't even really discussed Wood Warrington or Sugar Neverete. But there's more dates and more shows to come, aren't there? Yeah,
I mean, again, January's red hot, and then February is exactly the same. You know, with our new signing, Chispa Medina, on February the 6th in Guadalajara. It's going to be a massive Mexico show. But 21 and 28 for Feb. Feb 21, almost sold out already between Wood Warrington. It's going to be an absolute thriller. You got Ishmael Davis on the card, defending his title against Fawaz. What a brilliant fight. You've got Sandy Ryan challenging for the world title. So much more to be added even to that card. And then the week after is, for me, one of the best fights. I'd even say one of the best fights and nights I'm looking forward to that I've ever been around. Sugar Nunez against Navarrete. Two Mexican world champions in a unification fight in Arizona. And wait till you see the undercard for that fight. It is war after war after war. So yeah, we're really proud of January and February. We've got to keep going. You know, March is shaping up nicely as well, but a red hot start for Matchroom and DAZN.
And just finally, we've all seen photos and videos of Katie Taylor in the gym recently. I think, you know, she's never truly out of it, is she? But any update on Katie's next move?
I think, look, you know, Katie's Katie. She's going to be fit, she's going to be ready. She loves the sport of boxing. I think it's going to have to take something exciting to get her back in the ring. But, you know, the new year now is upon us. So those conversations will be starting in the next couple of weeks, and we'll see what happens. If she calls it a day, I think she goes down as one of the greatest legends of all time. Not even in boxing, but across sport. But, you know, I'm sure there's a little bit left in the tank, but Katie will make a decision with Brian and the team and Ross and her family and us in the next couple of months, I guess.
Eddie, thanks for catching up, and Blockbuster a few weeks coming up.
Cheers.